We got Leafs hockey back at Scotiabank Arena today with the Ottawa Senators in town. Scott Laughton opens up about a tough season and what he's looking to do to change that going into this season. Plus, the Anthony Stolarz contract talks take a new turn. We'll discuss that and more here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, your daily things for all things Leafs. I'm your host, David Morassutti, and unfortunately, I got my dates mixed up, and I thought Mike was going to be back for the Tuesday show, but he's actually back on Tuesday for the Wednesday show. So joining me again out of the bullpen, candid Frank Stanisci, or off the bench, I will say. Candid Frank Stanisci is back once again. So I want to thank you guys for coming back and listening to the show, and I want to thank Frank for coming back.
My pleasure, and thank you for the invitation. And the bench has a few splinters on it that I'm glad to not be sitting on.
I'm hoping that the splinters at Scotiabank Arena will be taken care of for tonight's game, because we do have hockey being played at this arena tonight. As we're recording this on Tuesday morning. We do have a Leafs game day to talk about, another one where the Leafs will take on the Ottawa Senators, and we don't know exactly who is playing, but usually in preseason, we get a good gauge that the NHL group, the guys who the people are paying the money to see, will be playing in this game. So when it comes to figure out who's going to play, let's just pick up the lines from Mark Masters on Sunday of the NHL lineup that didn't play in Sunday's game. So here's who I think this will likely be our close to projected lineup for this game. You got Matthew Knies with Austin Matthews and Matias Michelli, Bobby McMahon with John Tavares and William Nylander. You got Dakota Joshua, Nicolas Waugh, and Max Domi was on that third line during practice. We'll see if that's going to be the case going into this game. You have Lawrence, Lawton, Vallis, and then you got a couple of extra forwards skating around, Alex Nylander and Shaw as well. Now, whether these guys will be all in the lineup, obviously, you can only dress 12, so you have to figure out which 12 are going to go. I don't know. Sometimes they have a couple of holdovers from the last game that they'll give another shot in this game, but I think what we see here likely is going to be close to what to expect going into the game. Frank, Max Domi on the third line. Do you think that's something we will see stick, or do we eventually see Max Domi move up to another spot in this lineup?
I don't think there's any doubt whatsoever that they're not going to settle in with one guy right up, completely from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. As we know, seasons tend to go up and down. Teams don't perform as well one game to the next. And what usually happens in that case is they try something new. So the quick answer and the straightforward answer is no, they won't not try him. They won't not try anybody else, because at the end of the day, David, what they're working towards is the playoffs, and they're going to want to see and give their players an opportunity to play with each other, which we've seen even in the core four. Oh, wait, hang on a second. I shouldn't say core four anymore.
Yeah, but Craig Berube is going to have your head if you say core four, okay?
Two things I can't do. I can't mention Mitch Marner because Austin Matthews is tired of talking about it.
What are we doing here? I'm going to get in trouble with our commentators. We're bringing up Mitch Marner's name. That name's from the books. We got to go with the he who shall not be named. So
that's okay. The he who shall not be named. It's clear that Matthews is fed up with talking about that, and you can't blame him. And then we shouldn't be talking about it. But I was just mentioning his name in the context of the core four and the he who shall not be named being something that people want to get past and move on from. So the point being, though, that's the reason why we're going to have this experimentation for a very long time. It's going to go through the whole season. And that experimentation, as I said, is going to be to benefit what the plan is in the playoffs. So there's no point to not trying guys on the right side of Austin Matthews and Nyes.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think you're going to be seeing a lot of experimentation in terms of players being moved in and around the lineup. Guys playing in spots like we've always known what you see at one point in the year isn't always how it's going to end. So I think that's something that needs to be reminded. Now, some of you are probably wondering, we didn't get to some of the, I guess, the updates from the weekend. But Joseph Woll was dealing with an illness. I think he likely we might have seen him play a little bit of that game on Sunday, but the illness probably took him out for that. Nicolas Watt did have a lower body injury, but as you can see there, he was back at practice I'll just throw the lines back here. He was back at practice. One notable absence from these pairings, the defense pairings, and we'll get to them. I'll go through them in a second, but Simon Benoit not there. You have obviously Jake McCabe, Chris Tanev, Morgan Riley, Brandon Carlo. You have Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Matt Benning. You have Cade Weber and Smith. I'm trying to think which Smith that's going to be. But we haven't seen also Henry Thurn. He's another guy that obviously is a part of that trade for Ryan Reeves. Don't know if he is going to be getting which group he is technically going to be a part of. It's Blake Smith, by the way, just so I don't feel bad for remembering which defenseman. He was an undrafted defenseman, for anybody wondering. So I doubt we'll see how the blue line shakes out here in terms of who exactly will get into the game, because you can only play 6 defensemen. You cannot play 8 defensemen. But opportunities again for guys to try to show what they can do. And there's one player in particular, Frank, that you think you want to see have kind of a good start to preseason. That's Morgan Riley.
Yeah, and my thing with Morgan Riley is he has, from reports, lost some weight, which I assume will make him faster. I hope he's worked on his shot, because the one thing the power play the Leafs have with the guys that they have in the lineup, there aren't any heavy shooters there. I don't know if Villeneuve can the one thing that we saw in the game with Villeneuve is that he got the puck through. So there's 2 things that a defenseman has to do in the power play, and even when they're even strength, is a defenseman has to figure out how to get the puck on goal, get through the bodies, because the rebounds that come up are always much juicier opportunities than anything else that's out there as far as scoring goals are concerned. Not everybody can be an Alexander Ovechkin. So, some players just like Nyes. I mean, you got to get that puck in the crease for guys like Nyes and, of course, Matthews. Now, we haven't seen Michelli yet. Can he be the guy who passes the puck and the guy that takes a rebound that Morgan Riley hits the net and then make things start to happen? That's the key with Riley. Riley wants to be the number 1 defenseman. He has to be the guy that can shoot from the point and make opportunities in front of the net.
Yeah, I was asked, Morgan Riley being back on the power play. I was on 590, last minute 590 request, and they kind of asked me about Morgan Riley and how does that change, obviously, on the power play. It changes a lot, right? Morgan Riley, it just he I think, struggled to understand truly what his role was on the power play in terms of the shot wasn't there for him, so he's always kind of a deferring to pass. Well, if he's just going to just pass it off, what's the point of having him on the power play, right? Go and get a 5th guy in there. So they did the 5 forwards. It was obviously he who shall not be named, Nyes, Tavares, Matthews, Nylander. So, I understand that it's going to be an adjustment period for the power play. I think there's something that they've been working on the last few days. Morgan Riley's going to have to find a way to get pucks to the net. He doesn't have to take a slap shot. I think people always say, you got to have a clapper at the point. You don't need a clapper. You need a guy who is going to get the puck on net. You got bodies in front. You got a Matthew Nyes in front of the net that's going to screen the goalie. You have a John Tavares, who I would assume is probably going to either be front of the net or bumper. He's usually really good in that role. tipping pucks, right? Put something on net. If it gets tipped, it gets tipped. If it gets screened, it could go in, right? But you need to get a shot that's going to be, a bit of a seeing eye shot in some ways. If not, you're going to have to find ways to get the puck then to your other shooters. Austin Matthews. We know the times that the Leafs have deferred a little bit too much to pass to Matthews and hope he can put it on net. And when his shot wasn't at his best last year, it didn't really work out.
Yeah, they've got to create a new book on the power play that opposition needs to consider. They've got an opportunity here because they have, the absence of one of the power play guys. The power play is going to look different. That's advantageous for the team when it comes to opposing teams defending against it. So this is an opportunity for them to show what they can do that's different and keep, basically the opposition a little off kilter, right? So that's the important thing here that they can benefit from now. But also, it all comes down to as well, David, the interchange of putting in players who haven't been in the power play with Matthews to see how they can get the puck to Matthews, because quite frankly, it's gotten predictable. Now, again, Alexander Ovechkin in his same spot gets the opportunities. Can Matthews be that guy? Well, last year, no. It was something that for some reason, the predictability of where he was going to be, whether it was his health, whether it was his shot, whether it was his wrist, we don't know. So this year, what we're looking at a blank page, and now we're going to see what Austin Matthews looks like in a different group. And let's see if Morgan Riley can take a bit of that opportunity to feed Austin Matthews. It's not just about shots; it's about predictability with the power play. Can the Leafs be less predictable and harder to defend? That's what they got to work on.
Yeah, it's definitely something they're going to have to work on. They're going to have to make sure that the power play is at its best, because 5-on-5, sometimes they've struggled to get goals. So you got to get those opportunities on the power play as well. We'll go through kind of the rest of the lineup here. A few players that maybe we're going to watch going into this game, including a forward last year that felt that he didn't have his best foot forward after being acquired by the Leafs. We'll discuss his comments and more here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with the can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. If you're somebody who likes to put in a little wager for the game tonight, you can go and bet on a Leafs victory. You can bet on just pretty much anything. If Austin Matthews is going to be in the game, you can even see if he could score against the Ottawa Senators. Usually a good bet for Matthews to score against the Senators. So make sure you go and do that over at the FanDuel app. So if you're ready, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. The Locked On Leafs podcast continues here. David Morassutti, and joining me is my good friend Frank Stanisci. And I want to thank everybody for making the Locked On Leafs podcast your first listen. And if you're looking for another listen, please go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast. We're going to have a few special episodes coming out between now and the start of the season. We recorded our Atlantic Division contenders preview. So all the ones that made it to the playoffs, or majority of the ones that made it to the playoffs in that division, we had a little bit of a crowded room, so we couldn't invite everybody. But we went through all of our team's expectations, and it was nice to chat with all the other guys, even though we may have some animosity with the ones from Florida and Ottawa. But we kept things cordial. At least I did my best part to do that. The Leafs are going to be playing the Ottawa Senators tonight. We're expecting it to be an NHL lineup. As we're recording this, we don't have the roster being announced yet. That wasn't done, actually. The preseason lineup, I was kind of hoping we could have delayed it enough until we got the preseason lineup, but it doesn't look like we're going to get that just yet. So we're playing the guesstimating game of who is going to play. We assume it's going to be the NHL guys, which means Scott Laughton would probably get in the game tonight. He is somebody that, took a lot of criticism last season. Not as loud. I think it was a lot of the fans who felt that the trade didn't exactly pan out the way we had come to expect. But the great thing about this trade, and I talked about this on that preview show, so a little teaser here. The great thing about the Scott Laughton trade is it wasn't one where, okay, it didn't work out, we cut bait. It was, you know what? It didn't work out, but we got another shot at it, right? You get to keep Scott Laughton for another year. You didn't waste the first round pick on a rental. You got him back again for another year. And, he's somebody who made it clear that he wasn't good enough, right? And I'll read the quote that he told media on Monday. I wasn't good enough. That's the bottom line. It was hard. The hardest part for sure, leaving Philly. You grew up there, and we had our kid out there and everything like that. You built something there, and I think you're so ingrained in being a Flyer. So to come here was a different feeling. We had a discussion about this. Like it's when he was drafted, developed, he spent a good part of his time in Philly. And and you go from one team to another, the dynamics are totally different. Like Laughton was kind of one of the alpha dogs in the room in Philly, and he comes into a different locker room. But I do think that having a full off season with Toronto, with the Leafs, getting to know the players obviously a little bit better too, hoping that it'll change for him. Maybe he takes it on a little bit more of that leadership role, and things like that. Maybe he's being. I understand, people not being happy with him, but I'm willing to give Scott Laughton the benefit of the doubt that he can try to turn things around and be a valuable contributor on this Leafs team.
He has the biggest challenge that a hockey player, an athlete has. They go to their hometown to play. While they may not, they know more about the fans than they do about the team. And in other words, they're also more connected to the fans that are family and friends than they are the team. And what they hear from their friends and who are fans and that can be something that puts a lot of pressure on him because he feels obligated to be a central player because the Leafs made a first round draft pick disappear on his behalf. So he comes into Toronto, a hometown kid, and he comes in having to adjust with that extra little, I think it's a pretty sharp barb, and that is being in your hometown. You want to be the best you can. And I think the worst thing that I think he had to deal with, David, is the fact that he's a hometown kid and trying to be as good a player as he feels the fans deserve. And that might mean that he squeezes the stick a little more, that he doesn't think as clearly and with logic more than passion, right? So for a player like him, the passion that he brings to the game is very important. And that passion needs to be tempered with execution. So hopefully now he can look back at last season and say to himself, okay, here's what the effect of me coming to my hometown. This is what I think didn't help. I'm going to try and avoid that. And let's see what the positives are from last year and explore those a little deeper. And I think he will be a better player. And the alpha dog thing is the underwriting issue is that he feels like a leader and he comes here. And David, any guy that comes into a new organization that had, the cachet in another organization, he has to sort of sit back. Well, maybe that sitting back doesn't allow him or afford him the opportunity to feel like he's the kind of contribution he needs to make, that he becomes a passenger. So all those adjustments that he has to make, especially because the Leafs traded him for a first round draft pick. And to your point, you're 100% right. The Leafs got a guy that can get a second kick at the can. And you and I know that we saw in the playoffs that he showed some good signs. And if he can expand on those good signs that he had in the playoffs, he's going to be a big asset, a good third line center for the Leafs.
Yeah, it looks like, between him and Wob, they'll take care of the bottom six in terms of the center ice position there. And look, Scott Laughton has a lot to play for this year, not only to make a better impression, but he's due for a contract, right? So contract year, you're kind of putting yourself hopefully in a position to, get a good deal, whether that's in Toronto, whether that's elsewhere. Like there's a lot on the line for Scott Laughton this year. So you're hoping he's going to put his best foot forward. I want to see him play a little more on the penalty kill. It sounds like from Craig Berube, he is going to do that. They're not going to ask Austin Matthews to do as much of that. They'll have Lawton and Waugh be the kind of the main guys to take face-offs and play on the penalty kill, which I think is what you brought him here for. It was kind of strange to me that they didn't do it as much, but maybe because they were so comfortable with Austin Matthews being there that they just want, but I feel like if you can put those responsibilities on Lawton, it probably will make him feel a lot more confident to know that he's got an established role. He didn't really have an established role. Was he going to be the third line center? Was he going to be the fourth line center? Was he going to be a left winger? Like, I think if you give him, if you outline exactly what you need from him, I think he can thrive for sure.
Yeah, and the thing with the penalty killing with Austin Matthews in there, they know he can do it. And now when they need him to get some extra ice time because maybe you have a penalty filled, period or game, right? You want to get Austin Matthews out there. They can get him out there. But now I think you're right. Now they're going to start reeling him back a little bit because they want him to be fresh for 5-on-5 and the power play. So, if Austin Matthews isn't killing penalties, that isn't a great loss. Not that he isn't a good penalty killer, but that he can concentrate on other parts of the game.
Exactly. We need to see we need Austin Matthews to be back to being Austin Matthews and maybe focusing on his offensive production. They're going to need a lot of that from Austin Matthews this year. We do have potentially some players getting onto the ice, so we'll see if we can get a little more info on what's going on for tonight's game. And we'll discuss the latest when it comes to Anthony Stolarz and his contract. Can the Leafs get him locked up before the season starts, before his own deadline? We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Most people can name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. It does all the heavy lifting. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. And if you're looking for ways to identify how you can save, Monarch can help you look at inefficient things you are spending your money on, whether that's subscriptions that you hardly use, how much you're spending potentially on takeout, all of those things. You can do that because of the smart categorization that Monarch allows you to do on its app. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. I want to welcome you back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. David Morassutti here with my friend Frank Stanisci. Mike should be back for tomorrow's game where we'll be discussing hopefully another Leafs win, but we'll be discussing a game. And I'm just taking a look. David Alter's reporting that as the Senators get ready to host the Senators, Dennis Hildeby and Artur Akhtyamov on the ice early, getting in some work. So right now we're trying to figure out who exactly is going to play. Looks like we might get a Dennis Hildeby start tonight. Will we see Anthony Stolarz? That's going to be an interesting one because his name was brought up in the news this on Monday on his 32 Thoughts the podcast. Elliot Friedman was talking about whether or not the Leafs are close to getting a deal done with Stolarz, and it appears that there's been a slight issue with contract talks. I mean, what contract talks ever go swimmingly? Not hardly any. But we do know that Stolarz did say he wants his attention to be on the ice. That's where he wants all the attention to be. And he wanted a contract done here soon. I think that's talking with some people. I think we talked about it on the show. It's a little bit of a leverage play to try to force a deal to get done right on your own timeline. Sometimes that's a tough one, but Elliot Friedman said that Stolarz and the Leafs have been doing a back and forth, and it's narrowed a bit. And I think the one thing that term isn't going to be the issue in this deal. It's going to be how much are you paying him over that term, right? We're talking about a goalie here who, he is 31, right? He's going into the season as a 31-year-old. So when you're looking at that age, a guy who had a knee injury last year, you do have to be kind of mindful of how much money over that term you're going to pay, because the expectations also change, don't they, Frank?
Yeah, and don't forget, we're talking about a 35 game a year goaltender. We're back at the question: are you going to pay for what you think they're going to do, or are you going to pay them for what they have done? That's and what lies in between. So as far as I'm concerned, Stolarz was a great goaltender for the Leafs, in tandem with Woll. They were very good together, but he did get injured in the playoffs. Now we can discuss why he was injured and all that stuff till the cows come home, but that's not the point. The point is he was injured, and that's part of your history. So if you can't be healthy, the ability that's required for every athlete is availability. That's the primary goal. So it's hard for the Leafs to be convinced that a 35 game a year goaltender who has a history of injuries, the value, it doesn't go, in my opinion, it won't go past 3.5, 4 million. That's about as far as I would go if I was the GM. Now I'm not the GM, but I'm just saying, in my opinion, that's the kind of money you throw at a goaltender with the history of Stolarz. Now, if you want to convince yourself what he could be, yeah, of course, the value elevates.
Well, that's it, right? Like if Stolarz, we know that Anthony Stolarz played well enough to earn more starts, but he wasn't able to get on the ice enough to earn those starts. So you do have to understand that paying a goalie, I've heard, and I'm gonna see if I can remember the contract exactly, because we don't want to misspeak. But some people said no, he might have been looking to get the Kevin Lankinen deal.
Oh.
Which that was a 5-year, $22.5 million deal, so about $4.5 million per year. But the difference is Kevin Lankinen is when he signed that deal, he was 30. So you're paying him until he's 34. I can kind of understand a little bit of that. $4.5 million for goalies, not a lot, but the Canucks already had another goalie. That's a whole other situation. But there is another goalie here in this situation, right? As much as we want to say the Leafs need Anthony Stolarz, they also understand that they also have another goalie who they also believe in as well, and that's Joseph Woll. Now, Stolarz did have more impressive numbers than Joseph Woll last year, but Joseph Woll also played more games last year as well. So those things kind of you have to kind of take you have to kind of purse through all of it and understand that, yes, we would like to pay Anthony Stolarz what he wants, but we also have to be mindful that we have another goalie here. We have to think about the role that Stolarz is going to play within that tandem and how that will make it work with the money. Like I said, like I'm okay if you're going to pay him $4 million a year, because the numbers did back it up, but that also means he's got to play more than 30 games. He's got to get closer to that 40, 45 mark at least if you're going to be paying him that much. And so I think that's maybe where the Leafs are trying to get that number to make more sense for them, because when you have another goalie, and with Stolarz too, it's tough because the he's only played 142 career games to this point. I think he played really well in the playoffs up until he got hurt. There were a couple of blips, but that was like he had a really good start, and that put them in such a great position to put Otto away early, and they just couldn't finish it off because they couldn't. Well, we won't get too much into that, but I do believe that you can find a way to get this deal done. He's coming off being paid $2.5 million. I'm sure for him, he's probably just more looking for the term. So if you say, okay, if you want the term, just like a lot of other players, that dollar amount has to come down. The salary has to come down if you want term.
Well, because he's not talking, I'll talk until he gets back or I get back. Yeah, Stolarz needs and he has to prove that he's a more important goaltender by games. And the thing that the Leafs have done, which I find important, they've changed their plan of attack when it comes to goaltenders. They've gone into the idea that let's have more goaltenders. I don't remember the Leafs having this many good goaltenders under contract and on their team as they have this year. And we saw the Russian play the last game. He looks really, really like a good opportunity for the Leafs. Asmonov is what he showed was incredible. And then they have Hiddleby, and we talked about Woll. So the Leafs are dealing from strength. Remember, a goaltender is an asset, not just a goaltender. And that asset can be turned into something if you have goaltenders in the pipeline that can fill that space. And I think the Leafs have worked very hard on bringing in really good goaltenders. And that's hard to do because goaltenders that are good know they're good and they just won't go anywhere. They're going to go where they've got a shot. So they have themselves a couple of goaltenders. You don't want to see them leave because they find another opportunity. So maybe there's this game you got to play as an organization where you have a goaltender that you have faith in, and you're about to sign him, but you have these other goaltenders that want to prove something, and you see that they can prove something. Getting something for the guy that wants more than you can afford to give him, because the cap dictates X amount of money. And the goaltenders are an area where some teams spend $8-9 million on one goaltender, but a lot of teams are splitting the amount of money. Continue. I was just talking about Stolarz picking up.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, my computer absolutely crashed on me. I don't know. I'm gonna have to get this sorted out because this can't happen. This is a lot of the time was the internet when I crashed last time with Mike. Well, I'm gonna have to get that fixed. Sorry, guys. But yeah, go ahead, Frank. Keep.
I've said what I've said. Essentially, to bring David up to speed, what I'm saying is goaltenders are also assets. They're not just players; they're assets, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's what the league is all about with the cap. So you have to make a determination how much you want to spend on goaltending. Now, some teams decide to spend $8-9 million on a goaltender. Obviously, they have a backup and the starting goaltender. That's that situation. In this situation, we haven't seen that established by either Woll or Stolarz. So any number that starts elevating past $4 or $5 million, now you're paying a starter who plays 75-80% of the games, right? So now what you're stuck with as an organization, now you've got an asset that wants more money than you're willing to give them. And you've got, and I was mentioning that, I don't know if you agree, David, but the goaltending situation in Toronto, I don't remember it being this good. It's a really good crop of goaltenders they have. And they can't play them all, but they can use some as an asset. A young guy that looks really good as an asset, or a guy that's playing right now that maybe wants too much money, and you can jettison him for something. So, there's that as well. So this isn't just about the Leafs don't have their backs against the wall. They have to sign Stolarz at the money that he wants. They are in a position to be able to negotiate. And we saw a really good Russian goaltender that if that's how he's trending and that's the kind of goaltender he's going to be, then you want to make sure that he stays in the fold or you get something for him.
Well, exactly. And, this is why the term, I think they're not giving Anthony Stolarz 4 or 5 years. We know that and I think he understands that. So that's why he's probably saying, okay, well, if I'm only going to get 3-4 years, I want to get a little bit more money so that I'm not losing out potentially on those, near end of your career. And I get it. It's a business part of it too. But I do think that if you're the Leafs, you just have to be smart with how you're, given the assets. You're totally right. You have a lot of other things you want to eventually do, potentially, especially in the off season, right, where you have the potential to go out and get quite a bit. How do I say it? You can put quite a bit of money towards certain players available. So you want to make sure that your budget is in a good spot. Now, not having he who shall not be named and not having him signed allowed for a bit of that. So I'm just taking a look here. David also saying it's possible that both Nick Robertson and Easton Cowan play tonight. My guess is there might be a few veterans that are going to give the night off. Like Max Domi was dealing with an injury.
Yeah.
They might decide to give him the night off. So just make sure you go and check out those guys to see what the lineups are going to be like there. But it looks like maybe we'll see Hildeby tonight. We might not see Stolarz. So, but again, it'll be something to watch for throughout the rest of the preseason, how he plays and whether the contract is done or if the Leafs might have to go into the season wondering what they'll do at that position going forward. That'll be something to watch here. We'll keep you all up to date on that here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. I want to thank Frank for keeping us going while I wasn't here, and I probably he's like, okay, sorry, Dave. I'll keep the show going. But that's why Frank's here. He's a pro. He's a vet. He knows what it takes to get the job done. Mike should be back as we will break down this Leafs game over the Senators. We'll discuss a little bit more of what he missed while he was away. But until then, make sure you go and subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you're also subscribe to us on YouTube. Tell all your friends. And we're hoping to we're almost at 7,000. Our next goal is 10,000, where we'll have another giveaway. We'll discuss those details when we get closer to that. So until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.